Okay, welcome. My name is Heather Boyd, and I'm here with Sarah Hammond. We are here to talk about homeschooling through a pandemic today. Today is designed to be a very casual coffee chat. I'll start by saying right off the top, Sarah is my sister, but she is also a teacher and a mom. So we're coming at this from the perspective of the coffee chats we're used to having face-to-face at Station 1 Coffee House in Grimsby every 2 weeks, where we talk up a storm. And I'm just going to call a few people in from the waiting room while I chat. There we go. That'll happen a few more times over the next few minutes. So yeah, Sarah and I usually end up talking for about 2 hours together about everything under the sun, including education and child development and how we learn. And so we were getting the sense from a lot of parents and a lot of professionals trying to work from home who have kids, including teachers, just how much this added challenge of learning from home was creating a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry about what the priorities should be. So really today is about kind of unloading all that pressure and talking about priorities, talking about strategies, talking about perspectives that are going to make what is an absolutely extraordinary and unprecedented time more manageable, so that hopefully, we're not going to solve all of our problems, but hopefully we're coming away with a bit of a perspective around feeling calm and feeling maybe even curious or excited about what could be happening at home, working through, of course, all the challenges of trying to work from home, trying to navigate when you're going to get groceries or where, and worrying about parents or family members as well. So I thought I would start by just emphasizing again that we're not here to solve problems. We are two people who have our own perspectives on what works for us, but it's to generate ideas and brainstorm and just get some of that perspective. It's worth pointing out as well, from my perspective, that I'm a homeschool mom. I've been homeschooling for over 6 years. We're a hybrid homeschool family now. So we've had, by way of introduction, we've had our 10-year-old homeschooled from the start, and we've had our 8-year-old and 5-year-old in school for the first time since September. Now, obviously, everyone's back home again homeschooling, but I have this kind of hybrid view of in the school system and out. In addition to that, I'm an infant and child development consultant, so my perspectives are around attachment and child development and what kids really need to thrive. Sarah, do you want me to introduce you, or do you want to give a little blurb yourself?
You can if you want.
Okay. So Sarah, as you know, is my sister. That's a big part of why I wanted to connect with her today through this avenue. But she's been a teacher for, this is where you're gonna have to fill
20
in.
years.
Almost 20 years.
Almost
so
20 years.
You've been a teacher as long as I've been an occupational therapist and mom. And you've worked in, or Sarah's worked in alternative private learning environments, tutoring, and teaching in the public school system. So we're kind of coming from 40 years of professional experience plus 20 plus years of parenting experience between the two of us. But we are not experts, and we're not experts on anyone other than ourselves and maybe sort of our kids and family, but certainly not experts on anyone else's. So this really is a chance to just brainstorm and get some new perspectives. Sarah in particular has some nice resources to add to I want to make sure that we leave time for that.
Yeah, and just to add to, it's almost like as soon as we get used to one thing, it changes again. So that certainly has been the case the past few weeks. And just a heads up, I'm dealing with a situation that could be changing on an hourly basis. So if my phone rings, I have to answer that. So I apologize now if I do have to excuse myself.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah. And that goes for everyone too. I'm used to a lot of interruptions too, just from kids in the background, and that is no sweat to me at all. So yes, this is, I guess in short, this is not homeschooling. This is nothing like homeschooling. I know that at least one of you on the call is a homeschooler as well, who could probably attest to this. This is homebound learning during a global lockdown. This is not normal. This is not easy. Even homeschooling families who have been doing this for years are struggling because this is a new paradigm and a new way of working. Even for those of us who are used to managing, balancing work at home, for me personally, part of the reason I sent 2 kids to school was so I could work more. So that shift has happened. But in addition to that, all of our usual activities, extracurricular, trips to the library, or for those with kids in school, a 9 to 3 or 9 to 3:30 period of time for getting work done is no longer there. Parents are being asked to do an extraordinary role. Parenting is hard enough already. And now we've got kids at home who are not used to being together, who are not used to staying at home and not even getting to see their friends. And we have parents, of course, who are also putting in hours, and in many cases, full-time hours, working from home while trying to parent. And then the added, on Monday, the added layer in Ontario, and I think the timing was a bit different in other provinces and states, the start of this online e-learning through schools, which from my perspective and what I was hearing from parents was kind of the tipping point that they were barely managing, and then the added layer of learning through these online learning platforms. Sarah, did you have any perspectives on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that there are a lot of families under stress and dealing with, the added layers of perhaps one or both parents being laid off or getting reduced hours. There's a lot of other issues going on, and we had a day where parents were able to come to the school where I worked at to pick up technology if they needed technology to start their continued learning. And it was only the admin that were there to help with the distribution, but they were really surprised at how many families and parents come in, and at that point we're struggling already, even without the added stress of the e-learning. And our thoughts on that, or my thought on it, is that the e-learning is there to, we want your kids learning. We want your kids growing and developing, and I mean, ideally also, following the curriculum. But I mean, in the grander scheme of things, the e-learning that's out there, in my view, is there to take a stressor off parents rather than add to it. And I think that if parents are struggling with how they're going to meet or help their children meet the expectations that are being put out there on Google Classrooms or however they're getting it, is to remember that's there to serve and support parents and to take one stressor off them. And if it's adding stress, then that has to be, you have to take that into consideration. This really isn't, this should be one less thing you have to worry about, is what are my kids going to learn this week? So if you really don't know what to do with your kids or how to move forward, that's what that's for. I mean, we're definitely expecting kids to be using this time productively, but we also know that families are struggling with much bigger and much more urgent issues. Education, for sure, the education of your child is super important, but getting your education through the online stuff that's coming out is just one way to educate your child. And while super important, might not be the most urgent thing at this time in your family's situation.
That is, I'm so glad to hear you say that. And I realize that you're speaking up around your view and your perspective, but to hear that this is designed not to add pressure, but to add a resource. That's right. Wonderful. It's one of the things that I've been saying to parents over and over again the last few weeks is, and entrepreneurs as well, who are now inundated with all these resources on supporting them to shift their private practice. As it applies to homeschooling or learning, there's a lot out there now. There's the e-learning through your school board, there's National Geographic, and there's Scholastic. There's so many free online resources right now that it can be overwhelming. But I like to describe it as being like a buffet table. There are so many choices right now, but you have one plate and it's already filled up with the work that you're having to do, and making meals and figuring out your groceries and taking care of the needs of your elderly parents or whatever else is on that plate already, there's a bit of room to pick and choose from the buffet of what learning resources you're going to pull, or even how you're going to approach learning at all. And so knowing that it's not a stressor, it's a resource. The resource is there. Teachers are eager to support their students in whatever way they can via this new vehicle of e-learning. But I know in terms of our approach with the teachers, we have experience with unschooling. We're comfortable with a child-led learning at home. But even having done, so we didn't log our kids onto the system, but we are regularly emailing their teachers who are so happy to hear from us and so happy to get pictures around what we're doing. I figure, from my perspective, and again, those of you that homeschool will have this perspective already in terms of the question I always ask is what if? Like, let's think worst case scenario in terms of the learning piece. What if they didn't log on to any online learning for the next month? Let's start with month because it might get a little intimidating to think 3 months or more. What if they didn't do anything online? What if they baked with you and you're learning how to make sourdough bread? Or what if they dig a huge hole in the ground and start asking how far they would have to do to get to lava? Or what if all their learning was done through curiosity, through working with you and collaborating in a very playful way and being creative? And most importantly, what if they were able to learn all this while you were able to maintain a sense of calm in your house? I know, Sarah, you and I have talked about this before, that the idea that we cannot learn and children cannot learn when they are anxious, afraid, and worried. And so even if you are accessing online resources and getting onto Google Classroom, if the environment at home has a lot of stress, and let's face it, even for those of us who have fewer worries around finances or around work schedule and flexibility or support, our basal stress level, just because of what's happening globally, is up here now instead of down here. So even in the best case scenario, the stress level is a little higher. For those with multiple stressors, we're talking about an environment where our brains kind of shut off to learning, and it's just not the best environment to do that. So to go back to that what if, like the worst case educational scenario, what if they learned nothing for the next 2 months, but you were able to maintain as much of a calm and collaborative environment as you can? Just think of the learning that could happen naturally just through the materials that you have at home.
Yeah.
Do you have any? Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I know Sarah. Hi, Nate.
All right. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. Kids at home even while you're working. Yeah. I mean, there is a worst case, if you want to call it the worst case scenario. But just to put it in perspective too, in terms of if this past week has been a struggle for parents, I have a teaching partner who has 2 kids that are school age. One's in kindergarten and the other's in primary, I think maybe grade 2 or something. And he said that he had like one kid on one laptop, another kid with a printout, and he was finding it a struggle to keep, with the resources at home, with the limited technology and the activities, keeping them busy and occupied, and also trying to fulfill his own responsibilities with responding to parent and student emails and whatever else he needed to do for work. And this is someone who's been, again, he's been teaching for just as long as I have, and he's used to doing that with 20 kids. And he was struggling with 2 at home. We have to remember that our home environment is not the school environment. Teachers have an environment that is specifically set up for the learning that they're intended to do at school. And your home is designed to be a space where you can live. Yes, your child's learning there too. You are your child's first teacher, but there's a difference between the learning and the activities that go on at home, which are family centered. And so if you're trying to make your home into a school day, my guess is you're probably going to struggle even more with that, unless having the schedule looking like a school day is something that your children are responding to because it gives them a sense of normalcy. There's really no need to say, okay, well, normally you're at school at 8:40, so let's start your day at 8:40. Unless that's something that's actually working for you, you've got to give yourself the flexibility to say, our kids are not in school right now, and so that's not supposed to look like school. It's
Yeah.
just not, and we don't want it to. I know the message that I'm getting about what we're supposed to do is we are supposed to be focusing on task-based activities for the kids. I have given out worksheets, but only because parents have requested them, because I think it's something easy they can give their kids and it keeps them occupied, and you can usually find some kind of engaging, fun ones to give them. But it's kind of what parents needed to, because it was something easy that they could manage. Kids could do it relatively independently, but the focus and the message that I'm getting is that they are supposed to be task centered. So, getting them to be doing that building, getting them to do that creative activity that's somehow tied into math or language arts or science is what we're supposed to be doing, and also focusing on family activities, because we know many families are at home with their kids, and we're supporting that family time, even though we know they're juggling work as well. But to not just say, okay, you've got to go online and do these questions or play this online game or watch this online video. It's like, okay, you know what? Here's 3 games you can play with your family, and here's how it ties into, this is what they're going to be practicing by playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
So, hopefully that's, I mean, I don't want to speak for what's going on in other classrooms and other boards, but certainly the message I'm getting is to try and focus on the activities and the family, involving the family in the learning. So.
And I guess it goes back again to that idea that this is a resource for you to use. So if it gives you an idea of something to do with your children, then it's useful. But let me pick up on the thread that you were talking about home not being school. And certainly all of us who have done homeschooling, most of us have either learned this the hard way or have come on board fairly early to this idea that the home environment was never intended to look like a classroom. We were never intended to be a teacher in the traditional sense. Now, of course, as you point out, Sarah, some families thrive on that structure and some kids thrive on that structure quite naturally, and or because they've been in a school environment and they like or need that structure. But yeah, we're never intended to have a classroom at home, not in the conventional sense. Add to that too, and I think it's worth pointing out, because I mean, homeschooling, you Google it now and there's just, everyone is talking about homeschooling, and without defining it. We're not defining what homeschooling is. We're just calling this current situation of being at home with our kids who need to learn or have been in school following a curriculum and the pressure to continue to follow that curriculum. We're calling it homeschooling, but it's not homeschooling at all. And I know I said that right off the top, but I think when I think about our role as parents in guiding and teaching, and I'll put teaching in quotes, self-regulation, emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, problem solving and interpersonal skills, even those are going to look different at home than in the classroom, because your family dynamic as a family unit is different than a classroom. The rules are different, the routine is different, the flow of the day is different. So when you point out that the goal is to be task oriented, on the flip side of that, I think there's a lot of guilt especially for the parents who are navigating trying to work at the same time. And I know we face that in our family too, where my spouse is now my coworker who has his desk set up like 1.5 feet away from mine. And I'm used to having certain work hours where my kids were in forest school or my 10-year-old was able to work independently a lot of the time. That's gone. And so we are using TV more. We're using online media more. And I wonder if maybe it's a good time to strategize around how to find that rhythm or balance in using media and using activities and getting work done at the same time. What have you found works for you? Because you're in the same position, trying to teach your class through the online platform or connecting with them that way, but also taking care of everything else behind the scenes.
Yeah, we've had a slow start. Nate and I ended up spending 3 weeks together at home because and not doing a whole lot. And so we are literally just getting into swing of things this week. So I just want to reiterate that I'm speaking as a parent today, not as a teacher. So when I talk about some of the things that even I've been hearing, I'm not an official messenger for what, if you know what I mean. Anyways, so yeah, I actually can't speak to that because I had the luxury of starting up my classroom this week with my kiddos without this guy in the house. So he's back again today for the foreseeable future. So I'll know more about that next week. The thing I'm struggling with the most in terms of being on the teacher side of things is I'm hearing crickets from parents. I know from stories that parents are struggling, but I've reached out to parents a lot over the past week or so to make sure that they're feeling well supported. But I think we're going to hear back about how things are going in terms of, what we're putting out there helpful. I know that we're also focusing on the big ideas in terms of what we want kids to learn.
But it's interesting that you should say that, Sarah, because I'm on a few moms boards online, and a lot of them are panicking. But it took one person to say, well, have you reached out to the teacher to tell them how you're feeling or ask them for support? And the answer was no. So I think there's this sense that of trying to figure out what the roles are.
I think maybe parents think, why can't I do this? I don't know if they're having trouble reaching out because they feel like they should be managing this piece, but we know it's very challenging, and we're doing it too with our own kids.
So yeah, I guess the message would be to reach out for the support, whether it's related to education or other supports that we need right now. It's about advocating and reaching out for the people who are there, that the teachers are there and they want to help.
Yeah, and there are things in place like mental health has been another message that we are hearing constantly about our own mental health as a staff, and also how to make sure that families are taking care of their mental health. And the message that I've been getting is that mental health trumps their educational, they've got to be taking care of themselves, and parents aren't going to help support their kids' education if they're stressed out or struggling with things. So you have to be realistic about what you expect from yourself. And I think at the end of the day, if you're struggling with, or families are struggling with how to best meet their children's learning needs and doing what they feel like is expected of them from their teachers, is to just make sure if kids are being resistant to doing work or aren't focusing well, to be curious about that and ask them what's going on. And if you're having trouble meeting your kids' needs because you're stressed out, I would first start with, what do I need to help them with what they need? Maybe I need 10 minutes by myself. Maybe I just need my morning cup of coffee or an extra cup of coffee before I can, you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Because you're not going to meet the needs of your kids if you're not meeting your own needs and taking care of yourself. So I think it's giving yourself permission to if you're struggling with something, or your child's struggling with something, either academically or with the process of e-learning, is to be curious about that, and to model curiousness in general with kids. Like if they're working on something, what questions are they asking about the work that they're doing? Is there, like, it could be a jumping off point for something else. If you're playing a game with your kids, taking it one step further, asking them what their strategies are, like, oh, how come you're so good at this game? What are you doing? And then if they're sharing their strategies, that's showing that's, they're not just practicing a certain skill. Now they're starting to do more executive functioning, like being able to anticipate, being able to communicate. And then if you share your strategies, then they're learning from you, like just making sure the communication is there. It's not just silently and in a bubble doing these little activities. It's really important to be talking about the activities and
Well,
asking them about it, and asking them
I
how
love
would they make this game easier or harder, or why don't you teach this game to your friend online, and it gets the communication piece. There's so much you can do if you just be curious, because the curiousness hopefully is being fostered in them. They're gonna learn something from following, trying to then pursue an answer to whatever they're interested in. Even if it doesn't feel like it's following curriculum, it's probably still good questions to be asking.
Well, and I always love talking to you about that curiosity piece because it comes up over and over again. I'll point out, Fred, I did get your question. I've written it down, so we'll get to it when I have a couple of thoughts from what Sarah was saying first, and that is this idea of the curiosity piece, which I'll tell a little story because I think it's so telling. The advantage for Sarah and I to each have these different perspectives. I, at one point, was feeling like I wasn't doing, we unschool, so it's a very rabbit hole exploration kind of approach to learning. We're taking this as an 18-year project, so not a year-by-year curriculum-based project. For those that have come from curriculum and are home and are going back to curriculum, obviously the pressures feel different because you're trying to maintain that flow. But again, that curiosity piece and that calm piece, to be able to be curious and calm enough to learn, it's about our state, really. The calmer we're able to bring our states, the more that curiosity can come up and it can be natural. The example I have around that is my desire to get my 10-year-olds, and I think this was a year ago now, to write more. He wasn't writing at all. He had no interest in writing. I couldn't motivate him to write. So I decided, okay, like we're going to do a journal every day, like just write 3 sentences on anything. I don't care. And even that he was resistant to. And I thought, this doesn't feel good. Like I want him to enjoy writing. Like even if it takes 10 years, I would like him to be an adult that enjoys writing or that is able to articulate himself well in writing. And it was like, pushing against each other. The harder I pushed, the harder he pushed back. You got that counter will going. And Sarah, it was you that said, do you remember when there was, I think, a curriculum mandate came down when we were in elementary school that stated, or must have stated in your memory, that teachers must include daily writing projects for their students in, not primary, it was intermediate.
Grade 4. I remember it very specifically. I don't remember it in any other grade, but I know other grades were doing it. But yes, I remember it because I hated it. And I'm somebody who likes to write.
Yeah. And you don't like to write because you were made to do it. You like to write in spite of having been made to do that. But your impression back then was that the teachers were feeling like they had to do this too. Now, of course, memories can get fuzzier and our interpretation of their body language may be different, but it highlighted to me, and this is where, for most homeschool families, they have planned ahead. They have read a lot. They have grappled with what approach they're taking to learning. Right now, most of us are getting thrown into it without any planning. And so we have this sense that we need to make it happen. And making it happen is a recipe for counter will where nobody's going to be happy. Whereas if we can approach it as coming alongside and being curious, then we're able to learn something new. Like we're either learning more about our kids and what makes them tick, or we're learning about some new, like, oh my goodness, I was learning about architecture and the history of architecture from just sitting with my kids and watching their outschool.com course that we're taking. So, I'm learning as we go, and it's the curiosity piece that's nice.
Mhm. And
I
I think,
did want to, sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
no, I was just going to say, I think, it is hard because teachers have a mindset of um, what what's in the curriculum, or they have knowledge of what's in the curriculum, so they know what to look for. So, I
Mm,
mean, if we see kids in primary, because that's what I teach currently, working on building something, and we know in math that we're talking about angles or something, you can then start to talk about, or like, we know kind of what to look for, what to ask, and what
mm,
to listen for in their answers. So I get there might be some ambiguity there, but I think so long as you're asking kids questions,
mhm.
it doesn't really matter whether they're specifically based in curriculum. I mean, um, it's nice to know kind of what your teacher might be covering that during that time. But if you don't, or you don't see how it applies, how you can draw it in, it doesn't. Everything is so intertwined, anyways, that something that they're building could have connections to mathematics, to social studies, to science, to language arts. If they've built something that they really like, ask them what it is. And if it's some sort of a fort, you can ask them, well, who would live in a little house like this, or why did you make it with these materials, or um, how did you get it to stay up? And if they kind of go off on talking about something, and they're talking about a little
Mhm.
forest creature that would live in there, they might be interested in writing a story about it. Or if they're struggling with writing, I know there's tons of um, of online things that are fabulous for getting kids to write. And I know that there's someone online here who's way more knowledgeable about this than I am. And so the name of the program is escaping my mind.
For
But it's
those
one
that
you
were
can add
listening,
animations to. And if you want to put it in the chat, or speak up, let me know what it is. Because I'm willing to share if people are actually looking for more specific things, like, okay, once we do these activities, how do I tie it back into something that the teacher can recognize?
I th-
Um,
Sorry to chime in. I think it's called Pixton. You can do like little comic books. I think is that what you mean? Or?
what is it called?
Pixton, Pixton.
Okay, I don't know
And you
that
can
one, but there's
and you
tons
can
out
make
there.
you can come up with a story and make a little comic book with the
Okay.
characters.
The one, yeah, I'm thinking of another one that's very simple of that. I think it's called Toontastic. But there's
what I'm going to do for those that are listening, I've already started collecting some articles around approaching homeschooling during the pandemic, but I'll include a list of whatever resources come up during our call, in addition to ones that Sarah has kind of the top ones on her list too for supporting learning. So if anyone has other suggestions, feel free to either email me, and my email address is in the invitation you got for today with the link, or add it to the chat, with one caveat: I don't know that I can retrieve the chat again after the call, so it may be better to email me. There are two things that came up, Sarah, when you were talking that I really want to make sure I point out. You were talking about the curiosity piece, and I was listening to Pam LaRuccia, who's an Unschool parent and podcaster from Erin, Ontario. And I think it was on her podcast that they talked about striking curiosity when it's hot. It may have been Judy Arnell. Okay, regardless of where it was from, her point was this: that curiosity comes up, and it's like this big explosion of excitement and curiosity and questions. And as an adult who likes to structure my time and likes to, I like to put things in tiny boxes, and everything has a time and place. Even though I unschool and things are kind of free and wild, there's still this, in my head, this structure. There's a missed opportunity when we try to place that curiosity and put it in the, let's do that after we finish this, or let's do that after dinner or tomorrow when we have the right materials, or when I'm ready. And it just came up recently, actually, and I'm trying to capture this strike it while it's hot mentality with curiosity. There was something one of my sons was super excited about. Whatever it wasn't a good time to do it. We had to let it go. And now I brought it up, like, why don't we explore that? And it's like, no, that's so yesterday. Like, I'm over it.
Mhm.
And I think it's not that they are so uninterested that they wouldn't have gotten a lot out of it yesterday. It's that it's hitting that sweet spot of being engaged and curious and setting aside the immediate time, like as soon as you can, to set aside the time and go, okay, yeah, let's go down this rabbit hole right now. Even though I literally just put the paints on the table and I thought we were gonna paint today. Like, let's set it aside and go down this rabbit hole. You'll get so much more out of that process of engagement when you hit it when it's hot. And the second point, and this is just a strategy that I've started using, so many questions come up all day, or so many concepts emerge from playing with them or from watching them. And I think, oh, okay, they've just seemed to have discovered angles on their own, but they don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the concept. If I write it on the wall, like put a piece of paper and tape it on the wall and just put the word angles, it's a cue to me to pay attention to angles as we go about our day, or whatever the concept is. And so I find, I could start talking about the angles on their sandwich at lunch and, pull in the vocabulary of what it's called, or how would we measure it, or parameter, or whatever it is. And so I find I need to have those cues to revisit things that have come up that I think they're interested in, but that they need to be exposed to kind of grasp. I did, however, unless you had other things to add, Sarah, I wanted to talk about technology and the balance of technology, particularly, Fred had asked the question about 10 or 15 minutes ago around extended screen time and the balance. And there's not going to be any right answer here. This is all like, we're all navigating this. There are some schools of thought, no pun intended, using school, where media is a very minimum role in the family life or schooling life. I'll bring up Waldorf as one example, where screen time is very minimal. We have this love-hate relationship with technology, right? We know that it has value. In fact, we're seeing the value of it more in the last few weeks in terms of our ability to connect socially than we ever have, and the educational materials available there, mixed with this idea that we know that experiential learning is what our brains are built to do. We're built to pick up heavy things in our hands, to feel mud in our hands, to be able to manipulate objects and build, have gravity working against us when we're trying to make a tall tower, and on and on. And yet we're faced right now in particular, and certainly this is an issue even without a pandemic, around multiple demands on our time, working from home, trying to get the meals on the table. And I think if I literally just took care of feeding my kids and getting the laundry done, that would be our day. Like, our day would be full. Pretty much. Like, it feels like I could be doing that all day. And now, I also want to work, and I also want to help them learn and sit down and read with them. So there's no perfect balance, but my perspective right now is twofold. One is I'm trying to let go of this, and I don't know what word to put to this, my judgment of media with my kids, so that they don't feel, because they will tell you, Mom hates video games, Mom hates when we're on watching TV, but we love it. And I think I don't want them raised in their childhood with the sense that somehow there's something wrong with enjoying a video game and fully embracing and sinking into the pleasure of being on Minecraft, and to be playing longer than you ever have, and just immersing yourself in it like this glorious thing that it is. And that to me is better than feeling this, I don't know whether it's ambiguity or whether it's this mixed feeling around, well, I'm doing it and I like it, but Mom hates it, so there must be something wrong with it. So that's one line of thought that I'm working on, because I do tend to come in and say, guys, like, you've been on the TV or on the computer all morning, like, that's it, like, that's too much screen time. And it's that judgment that places a value statement on something that is actually quite wonderful. On the flip side, I think it's the struggle is in figuring out how to balance out screen time when we need to use it for so many reasons, with what gets squeezed out when they are on the screens all day. Not all day, but a lot more than we ever expected. And I think, you know, and again, not to place too much value judgment on it, so I'm not going to use junk food versus vegetables. But if I think about that analogy of the buffet table again and what's on our plate, if the plate included a lot of meat and you wanted to up their vegetable intake, it's not that you're taking away the meat and saying meat is bad. You're simply filling the plate with more vegetables so that there's a balance there. So you're not placing this negative judgment on the meat, you're placing a positive value on enjoying the vegetables. And in that end, my goal, and again, this is a messy work in progress in my house. Like, oh my goodness, the judgments that I have around, you know, video games and YouTube videos that teach them about Minecraft, where we can't, like, the voice that is on the video is so grating to both my spouse and I that we just can't even listen to it. But there is that balance. And I think I guess the third aspect of that for me, and then I will stop talking for a little bit, is this idea that, you know, there is evidence that lots of screen time does make it more challenging behaviorally because of the impact that kind of activity has on the brain. This is not a guilt trip. This is about figuring out how can we balance it out so that they're getting what they need. I used to have us do all of our activities, and at the end of the day, it was video time. And in one sense, it allowed us to do a lot more outside of video screens, but it also placed this coveted pedestal of video games. Like, somehow it wasn't worthy of spending time during the day on it, and yet it was this reward at the end of a day if you did your household responsibilities and you cleaned off the table and you did some reading with me. And so it was this double, like, pedestal at the end of the day, and it's not worthy of our time during the day. And we've eliminated that so that we have this balance of, you know, and it turns out that it works very well with my work schedule, because I'll have a call at 10 o'clock and a call at 1 o'clock. And so when I'm on a call, they're on screens. And when I'm not on a call, where I'm saying I'm available, I am here, I want to play with you, I want to be with you. And then when I'm on a call, enjoy the screen time, enjoy the game or whatever. Does that resonate a bit, somewhat parts of that anyway? Awesome, okay. Any other thoughts?
It's a difficult thing to manage, and I know everybody has to find their own balance of what they're comfortable with in terms of screen time. You know, because sometimes it can be an escape and a way for kids to unwind, and, you know, if they've been doing things and trying to negotiate relationships with their siblings and share and all that stuff. And it's not, and I don't think, I'm not of the view that all video, like, I'm not against video games as strongly as I think you are, because I do see there's so many great games out there that really actually are fun and aren't just mind-numbing and aren't violent, but I certainly know and respect parents who really try to limit their screen time, but I know kids really like it, and I don't know if kind of, you know, you don't want to put it on the pedestal. I guess I can see, I hadn't even thought of that being an issue when you delay it, you know, till the end of the day or something. But, you know, if kids are enjoying that, you know, setting those limits in terms of, you know, we don't go for hikes for 8 hours because our bodies can't handle it. And so while it feels different for your brain to be doing the same thing over and over again, is different than the physical, you know, feelings that you get when you do something over and over again. That might be an analogy they can understand. There's a balance there. And every family is going to find their own balance, whether it's 1 hour a week or 1 hour a day or more. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it needs to be monitored. I think the important thing here is that screen time is monitored, and you're always aware what's going on your child's screen. There's certainly safeties that you can be putting in. Parental controls, I don't know a lot about it, but I do know I know a little bit about it. So if someone has more questions about that, I can probably look up some information on that. But I know if you're really purposeful with it, where, okay, when you do get screen time, you're going to be watching these videos or these documentaries, and if they're from sites that you're familiar with and you know what the content is, or they're from a trusted source, you can start to feel better about that. Even YouTube videos with the parental controls don't always catch everything, but you can at least get rid of the ads using, there's a site that you can simply put in the link to the YouTube video that you want to watch, and it removes the ads automatically, and it's free. So that's one piece. And really, there are some really good educational games out there. So when your kids are on screen time, you can maybe get some peace of mind that it's not just wasted time. But you've got to find the balance you're comfortable with, for sure.
And Colleen just typed in the chat, safe YouTube.
Yep, that's it. Thank you, Colleen.
And then I know Paul Davis has some resources and is a speaker on internet safety in a way that can feel a little bit revealing in terms of the risks that are out there. But again, I think it comes back to the monitoring. I'll add, it's ironic. I don't hate video games. I think it's that I have so many other things that I value more, that I am placing those value judgments on my kids, who should be able to freely love it, even though it's something I don't like. But I'll tell you something else. When I sit down and decide that I'm going to play Minecraft with them, A, they are so excited. B, they think I'm incompetent, which is also rather exciting for kids to have parents not know how to do something that your kids are really good at. And C, it's actually a lot of fun. It's just that there's 9 other activities at the same time I want to do, and so I'm working personally.
And I know Minecraft is virtual. I get it. It's not holding blocks in your hands, but there is so much thinking and planning and problem solving that goes into building something in Minecraft. There's something you get out of that you can't get out of building blocks in some respects.
I think our entire future architecture, community is going to be.
And what you were saying, you could even work together on Minecraft. You build things with other people remotely, which is another thing I wanted to say about technology. I mean, especially in a time where we're being isolated from each other, technology is a great way for kids to connect. We had our boys playing, well, they were supposedly playing Battleship. It ended up with them goofing around on screen, but they were interacting with their cousins online because we don't get to see them. So using technology can be a way for kids to feel connected. That kids, especially as they grow older, they need that social, they learn and need to be interacting with their friends as part of their development and growth. Absolutely. And so using it as a tool in that sense, I think, is really important. We don't want our kids to not see their friends for 3 months. So some form of connection with them, and if it's playing a game online and it's a game that you know and you're familiar with and you approve of, then I think that's also really important.
Yeah. Well, and it also speaks to the idea that if kids are getting together, there's a lot of, in person, there's a lot of goofiness. There's a lot of, horseplay and wrestling and poop jokes or whatever they're into at that time. And I remember that last call that our boys had together, and with a friend, it was the same thing, another friend. I don't think any words were spoken. I think they were goofing around non-verbally with whatever little graphics they could add, and they were laughing. And I thought, what if did they even talk? And maybe they didn't, but that's as close as they're going to get to that horseplay and that goofiness. It doesn't have to be verbal, it doesn't have to be words. It's still connection. And if they're connecting often enough, they'll eventually move on to a conversation because they'll have more to share in a different way that requires a bit more of a sentence structure than they were, instead of barfing rainbows or whatever they were doing on Kids Messenger the other day.
Right. Yeah.
I'm seeing our time, and I wanted to make sure that if anyone had thoughts to add or resources or other questions, that we had time to kind of open this up a little bit more into a bit more of a community chat. Sarah and I, again, we will talk for 2.5 hours at Station 1 Coffee House. We don't want to talk for 2.5 hours today. But did anyone have thoughts or ideas that they that came up for them or that they want to share?
So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Fred. I have two little ones, the JK and grade 2 daughter. And I am actually going through teachers college now at Queens here. So I have a lot of time, but also a lot of opportunities to practice online in terms of lesson plans and also looking up resources and sort of figuring out things. But what I found is, what my question was about the technology. So we have a lot of games. They do coding games. My son learns a lot about letters and pronunciation and things like that. A lot of math that we do with marbles. But I guess my comment would be is that even though they love their little tablets, they have little tiny, very not powerful tablets, but they somehow almost prefer the hands-on. So we did a coding game yesterday, but we did it on the carpet in the living room. They came up with the giant arrows that my daughter was giving it to my son, and my son was moving the truck around just by, so I think they prefer hands-on, and I think you're right. They need that time sort of off everything just to go and get completely, enthralled in this sort of game that they're playing or a video that they're watching. But speaking personally for mine, they really love having their hands on things. So we have several projects that are sitting on the, and it's, again, like you said, it's just that curiosity, right? Of, something came up, and then we do the same thing, kind of like you with a little note. We do, let's make a bird feeder. So we have two different things that we were supposed to be recycling, but now we're going to make them into bird feeders. But they saw, so what we explored bird feeders. So there's, instead of like a boring one, you can do like a 3-bedroom bird feeder or something. So they've collected a bunch of other things from recycling. So there's a project sitting there. But you're right, like it's kind of reacting to them, and if you have enough time to sort of pursue it with them, that I think that's the best.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I would have to say I agree with you that you can't you can't downplay the importance of kids holding things in their hands, and technology is a tool that can be used to support that if you don't have materials at home to use, or but yeah, there's no replacement to holding them in their hands. And I just love that story of them building the birdhouse, and you just can't get that out, that engagement and working together online. It's just another tool to get there. Is the technology piece, I think.
And here I go interrupting you again, Sarah, just like we do it when we're face to face. We talk quite a lot and interrupt each other, but it's always because you trigger things that I want to share so much. And I think, Fred, what you had said speaks again to that idea that if the computer is this coveted or restricted thing, and of course we need boundaries around meal times too, but if it's a coveted reward, we want it. Like, we want what we can't have. And so much energy would go into wanting the tablet. But if it's available and there's this more fluid approach to access to the computer as an ebb and flow to the day, then I think it opens up that possibility more that Fred was talking about, where they'll use it when it's useful to them and then move on to the hands-on, because that meets a need as well, rather than chasing what's not allowed or what's being restricted.
I think another thing to do with the hands-on is also that human connection. The kids just want to interact with each other if they're just playing with their own siblings, and especially with their parents. And right now they have this amazing opportunity to spend way more time with their parents than they usually do, except maybe on summers and weekends. And they're just craving that. They just want you. They don't even need you to do anything well. You can suck at whatever you're doing. They really want to spend time with you, whatever that might look like. So you are probably more attractive than the screens.
Mhm.
That speaks to a challenge I know that I've had, and so I imagine others have had too, in terms of the working from home piece. You know, it becomes, and the kids know this, they hate my computer because they know when I'm on it. Like, you can't multitask on a computer. You cannot write, at least I can't, write an email and answer a question about what they can have for snack. Like, it becomes a 1-hour email instead of 5 minutes. But what I found is by being really deliberate, and again, this is a work in progress. It's messy, real life here. Like, it's so far from perfect, but I'm just talking about direction, not perfection. When I can take a break and shut the laptop and do short little bursts of work, and thankfully my work is flexible that way. The work that I do can accommodate that. I realize that not everyone is in that position. Then I go fill their cup. Like, I am here and 100%, like, the phone is nowhere near me. The laptop is nowhere near me. To be okay with them opening the tablet when I'm there is a little tricky because I think I'm here and available for you. But ultimately, to fill them up with that connection and then to withdraw back to the work I need to do has seemed to work smoother than what used to happen, which was me working all day and like barely stopping for dinner. And they would literally say, Dad is fun during the day. And then at bedtime, I was all in, like, everything shut down. Mom was fun at bedtime. I thought, okay, so I know what being on looks like and feels like, because at bedtime, I'm not distracted by work. It's shut down, it's done. Let's see if I can do that more during the day, even if it's in discrete periods of time throughout the day.
And if I could kind of build on that, is even though this can be a very stressful and very confusing time, that if we can look at this time as a gift, this, you know, this is an opportunity for us to really slow down and spend time with our kids in a way that we might never have been able to before. This is an opportunity for us to get to know our kids better, and taking this as an opportunity, if you're working from home, finding a balance where you can take advantage of the fact that you are home with your kids, and because at the end of the day, whether we're doing this for another few weeks or for several months, if you want to look back on this time, how are you going to remember this time? Are you going to remember this time as, yeah, this was I remember COVID-19. I remember we were pulling out each other's hair and fighting over technology and arguing, or even if it was something positive, like, yeah, you know what, I got my kid to finish every assignment and supported them so they did more learning than they ever had before because I could work with them one-on-one? Or do you want to look back on this time and say, you know what, I remember COVID-19 and there was a lot of change and challenges, but I just remember I got to eat breakfast with you every morning because I didn't have to rush off to work. And I got to play with you more than, you know, even if it's not a lot, because a lot of parents are having to work at home, and those lines get blurred between work and home time even more than ever. But to look back on this time, how do you want to remember this time? How do you want your kids to remember this time? And it doesn't have to, they don't have to take away the stress and the uncertainty. They can look back and say, yeah, I remember COVID-19 and I remember my parents were home a lot more, but I remember playing, I remember we built a fort. That's what they're going to remember. I think that's when you look back on this crisis, that we want to, you know, it's an opportunity for families to pull together, and I think, you know, by keeping a balance and keeping perspective, as not stressing about individual assignments for your kids.
In 20
And I don't want to downplay it. I'm a teacher. I'm the one given the assignments, but
that's where the dichotomy is.
Our students' well-being is really the utmost importance.
It's that push-pull, you know, between our two roles, you as a teacher, me as an unschooler. But, you know, even when we all can highly value learning, whatever that looks like to us, in 20 years, it may not matter what specifically they learned on paper as a recorded like achievement in the next 3 months. What would matter more is how they felt about it.
Mhm.
So I think those were, I almost wanted to just stop the recording after you talked, Sarah, but you know me, I like to have the last word. But those words, Sarah, are just brilliant. And I think that is the perfect sentiment, not sediment, that would be talking about earth sciences, which we have been talking about in my house. The perfect sentiment to end on in terms of we, despite everything that's going on, we are in charge of the vibe that's happening in our home and a chance to connect. Even when we have so little control over many of the things, we do have control over that. So, Sarah, thank you.
You're welcome. And if anybody needs any, I know I feel like we didn't do a lot of practical stuff, but if people are looking for online resources or tasks they can do with their family that have a basis in, you know, the curricular areas, please don't hesitate to reach out. I enjoy sharing what I know. And I don't get that as much as I normally do.
How can they reach out to you, Sarah? How do they get in touch with you?
I guess they can email me at hammondsa@hdsb. I'll put it in the chat, and I'll put my Twitter handle as well. How's that?
That sounds great. And I will, I'll compile some of these key resources and email them out to all the people that are registered today. And I may even be able to pull it together as a blog at heatherboyd.ca. But thank you everyone for being here today. If you're interested in a similar chat where maybe now that we've got the basics of all that's happening under our belts, maybe we can have more of a brainstorming session. Just again, email me. My email is in the invite that you got for today. So thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.